The National Theatre, I'll just briefly say what it is. Obviously, it's a building, a large building with 3 theatres in it. But really what defines the National Theatre and its challenge of today is the scale. That's seen its scale massively increase in the last sort of 10 years, really. And that's in 2 ways: number of audiences we reach, but then also the breadth of what we do. And that's really had quite a big impact on how we do insight. But really, as well as making plays in our theatres, doing cinema broadcasts, we also run education workshops. We have restaurants on site, shops. And really, this has led to us becoming more and more this kind of very multi-skilled, multi-armed kind of beast. Within that context, insight has become increasingly important to help influence decisions. And the team that I lead at the National Theatre is called the Data Studio. And we're a team that aspires to influence decisions using data and research. We needed to find a focus for what we're doing, because in a world where you could be asked to look at the product mix in a cafe one day, and then look at what the diversity target should be for BAME audiences for theatre the next, you need to have some kind of focus. So what we've said is that we will improve the most important decisions that the National Theatre makes, and that there's a careful choice of words there. First of all is that we're focused on decisions, not producing reports and data on its own, although we do that all the time. We really want to see through the data insight we produce and know that it's had an impact on decisions. And maybe that's historically, I guess, the world of theatre has not been very, very data driven. And so what we're always wary of is people asking for us to back up a decision they've already made in their mind, because that's of relatively low value, as opposed to us really influence how they think. And the most important decisions, well, we get more requests really from the teams at National Theatre than we can handle. So we want to focus on the most impactful and the biggest decisions. And we're not supported by explicit processes, which is to say that nobody at the National Theatre has to use us. Anyone is free to make any decision they want at any time. So we really have to prove to everybody at the National Theatre and the wider theatre sector, because we do some cross-sector work as well, that it really is worth using. All the hassle of interfacing with us and explaining things in terms we understand, and then us taking about 3 times as long to do something as they would like us to do, is worth it. And I think that makes us a better team, that always having to convince people that data insight has some value. I also think it makes us quite good at jettisoning things which don't really work, because actually sometimes those stakeholders are right. We should be quicker. We shouldn't I always say we shouldn't always use data to make a decision. Sometimes I really want stakeholders to use their gut instinct, and then we'll see what happens. Also, to focus us, we kind of came up with a few catchy, or not catchy, I don't know, things that define us. We help the National Theatre become bolder without being rash. So we always have an inclination to drive containable risk. And that's because if a theatre director or a head of retail or a head of broadcast at the National Theatre kind of wants to just keep doing what they've always done, you don't really need data and insight to do that. You should just do it. We're here to really help people move through the world of risk, but not too much risk, hence the without being rash qualifier. And we picked 4 priorities that we're working with for the moment, and we'll see how they go, which are financial impact, national reach, diversity and inclusion, and innovation. Those are the 4 types of initiative or project that we think that we can add value to. So what do we actually do? I thought I'd list some examples. In a really simple sense, what we do is get involved in projects. Rather than, we do have a day-to-day responsibility to produce some facts and figures, which are standardized, but mostly it's around projects involving change or risk. Having said that we are agnostic, there are some things that we always do. So forecasting and segmentation tends to be tools that we have an aptitude in, and we find them helpful to de-risk a project or to help people really see the right way forward creatively. And it's worth noting that, and I always say this at the start of any project with a stakeholder, we do make mistakes. Not everything works. And segmentation we find a useful tool as well. Pricing analysis is something that's really key to us. One of the earlier presenters was talking about moving business to business to consumer. And for us, we are mostly B2C, so to speak. and getting pricing right is really really important for us. We have essentially theatre is a non-fungible, perishable product. Once the theatre seat isn't sold and the performance has happened, you'll never be able to sell it. So getting pricing right is really important. A lot of the requests we get from people in the world of theatre are essentially product development requests. Now, that isn't a language that's used in the world of theatre, but it's something we boil it down to. And what we're trying to do is standardize and find a common way to help people develop whatever they do. One example would be our immersive storytelling studio, who are innovating and trying new ways to deliver immersive storytelling, so that's virtual reality and augmented reality. But equally, our retail arm want to know the best product mix to use. So milkshakes versus cocktails is a very live debate for us. We're very, very interested in diversity and inclusion. That's because it's a priority of the National Theatre, but also because it's just important to us as a team. So what we've tried is forecasting diversity of audiences to help drive discussions. So rather than just be that rear view mirror, so we can tell you through data insight what happened with the decision you made, we're trying to look out through the front windshield and kind of say, if you program like this, don't be surprised if your audiences look like this. And that's had some success. We want to move it on, but it has had some success. And the National Theatre, we're helping the National Theatre set targets for BAME audiences and deaf and disabled audiences. It's quite daunting, the initiative to set targets for diversity of audiences. So far, I found relatively few people in any industry who've gone that far. There tends to be more common to have targets for diversity of staff. I'll talk very briefly about one project, which is exploring the cultural value of theatre. Cultural value is something that we've undertaken some research in, and it really tries to say, irrespective of what people choose to pay for, how much they choose to pay for it, and how frequently they go, what's the long-lasting value that people draw from a cultural experience? Essentially, we got audiences to compare lots of different activities, like dancing in a club, watching something on TV, going to watch a live football match, and watching theatre, and then boil down the differences to really say, well, this is the core of what theatre going is, as defined by audiences. I also want to just talk about the approach we take to every project with the data studio. And there's a kind of assumption that we have that underpins our approach, which is that we've got a skepticism about data and insight. As I said before, I think quite a lot of times people make decisions on gut instinct, and when they can find research and data to back that up, then that's great. When actually the data contradicts them, they kind of find a way to ignore it. So that might be a bit cynical, I don't know, but that's our assumption. And we also think that research and insight can generate amazing, powerful ideas, but they're sometimes driven, who says the idea is actually as influential as what the idea is. So we wanted to counter that. So really, we run our insight projects essentially as change projects. One of the approaches that we find helpful is we say, if we run this research and insight project, and out of it comes insight, which actually doesn't chime with the majority view, how will that be accepted? And we use the structure of the project to actually create an environment where those minority views are better accepted. This is quite emergent, but there's an academic theory called social influence and social change theory, which I've leaned on to help design our approach to projects. And the more accessible version, rather than going and reading the academic papers on that, is that actually there's the film 12 Angry Men, which some of you may know. The dynamics of that group actually support a lot of the academic theory on how data could and should be used to expand upon minority views. So I've started creating, and I've run a couple of times, a training program for people who use data and insight using the film 12 Angry Men to try and get them to see data and insight in a different way. So that really is, in a nutshell, kind of what we do at the National Theatre. We don't have perhaps quite the most amazing statistics to draw from, as we've seen from other stakeholders here, but we try and run it insight projects as change projects, and as I said, bring out the minority view. Thank you very much.